Hi everyone, my name is Thabang. I'm going to talk to you about our project where we were monitoring pine plantations that had been clear felled, and these areas were to be incorporated into the garden route. So many of you are well aware that Sandparks has a national mandate of conserving representative samples of South Africa's ecological landscapes. But according to the global biodiversity outlook, most protected areas are actually not meeting that mandate. And for the garden route, it's generally due to our climate, the shape of the park, its history prior to proclamation, and the open access nature to it. It lends it vulnerable to disturbance or degradation. So it makes rehabilitation quite an important part of biodiversity conservation. So rehabilitation, unlike restoration, which are terms that everyone uses interchangeably, tries to reinstate ecosystem function to enable ecosystem services and goods. But rehabilitation, on the other hand, tries to bring back a previous condition, which often you can't actually achieve in certain systems, like in the garden route, which has an intense agricultural history, and so you can't actually return the system to a previous condition, but you can sort of improve to maintain ecosystem services and goods. So, which brings us to my project that I was monitoring. So I was monitoring areas that had been under pine plantation, and these areas were decommissioned by MTO and rehabilitated and incorporated into the garden route. And they were converting back to Fynbos, which was the vegetation prior to afforestation. But these areas had been under plus 50 years of plantation, so they've experienced degradation, lots of change, and theory predicts that environmental degradation and along with diversity loss increases risk of ecosystem collapse. So, and we needed to monitor these areas because rehabilitation is not really an outcome, but a process that you have to monitor because it can sometimes fail. So what we know about Fynbos when it comes to recovery is that it recovers well after you remove pine plantations, but that ability to recover sort of decreases with a number of planting rotations. So what we did was we assessed the recovery of clear-felled pine plantations in terms of vegetation structure, species, composition, and functionality to sort of tell us, are we able to recover these areas after they've been clear-felled of these pine plantations. And so we also wanted to see what management history affected recovery. So if you see, look at the picture on my on your left, on your right. Okay, it shows where the areas are. So we selected sites of the varying different felled ages or recovery after clear felling, and these sites we knew their history in terms of like plantation, what species they were planted in, planted with, and then the as well as fire history, and plus as well the number of planting rotations. So basically, the planting rotation, is like 20 to 30 plus years in the garden route, and some of these areas had about 2 to 3 planting rotations. And we collected habitat and vegetation information on that. And so just to give you a bit of what we collected was that we collected felt age, plant species, and then some habitat information that we wanted to see if there's like any degradation, to show any signs of degradation, like erosion as well as organic matter, because all of these things affect recovery. And so what did we find when we actually looked at the data? So when you look at plant density, it actually decreased with the increase in number of planting rotations. And if you look at species richness, although it decreased, that decline was not significant. But if you actually now going deeper and you actually look at the recovery in terms of like the number of years after clear felling, you do see that density or abundance on my right um, actually was significantly different. It was much lower. If you look at the sites that's 2 years and 3 years after clear felling, and then you look at the sites that are 4 and 5 years after clear felling, you can see the difference. But if you actually look at species richness, you see that, well, the decline or the decline in species richness isn't really tied to the number of planting rotations, but it's actually linked to soil depth. So how much moisture or nutrients those plants could actually get. So it's not really a decline per se to the number of rotations, but to habitat conditions. So, and if you look at species evenness, it actually improved over time, although the increase was not significant. And then you also look at alpha diversity, it declined. But if you look at the data much more deeply, you find that the decline was actually due to changes in herbaceous plants declining. So it's not actually due to the planting rotation or the species, the pine plantation, the pine species that were planted with. So, and then you look at, if you go down deeply into then the species evenness, you can see that it increased nicely through from 2 years to 5 years. And then you look at alpha diversity, you see that, okay, it follows the pattern of soil depth, but I didn't put it in here, but when I compared it, it follows soil differences. And so we also looked at water repellency, because we know that water repellency actually is the thing in areas that have been under pine plantation, and repellency affects how fast or affects erosion and wettability of the soil. So what we found was that there was a significant increase with in water repellency with the number of planting rotations, but that although it was correlated with a decline in shrub height, but it wasn't correlated with it wasn't correlated at all with cover. And so it does indicate that it affected the growth maybe of the vegetation, but that impact was not enough to cause a significant impact on the vegetation. So, and if you look at species composition, there was species composition declined with the increase in number of planting rotation, and if you then look at the species that sort of caused the decline, you find that it was just changes or certain species not being present in the older sites, and these species were pines that were present in the younger rotation or the younger sites, but not present in the older sites. That means probably they were removed before the younger sites came along. And so, and if you look at growth form, and it also declined, and the cause of the decline was ratios not being in the older sites, but that could be due to just competition with the shrubs that were coming along. And so, so what does this all mean? So the decline in diversity, to me, was explained by decrease in herbs, and the decline in species richness was due to the soil rather than actual rotation or management history. And the differences in species composition was due to the different successional stages at which these sites were, rather than actual history of the plant of the plantations. And so it was probably due to competition suppressing your herbs. That's why you had a decline in certain or changes in certain species. And so what can we conclude from this? the Fynbos is actually quite resilient. It recovered well after pine plantations, similar to other studies. And I think what helped the recovery was the proximity to the reference site, which is the red that you see over there. And because some of the clearing was done in a chronological order, it meant that certain areas, while they were recovering, they had the opportunity to also clear alien plants. So they just didn't clear once and then leave that area. It meant they had more opportunity to come back and clear aliens while when they clear fell the next area. And so the extensive road network, though, in the area is causing invasions in those areas. And I think it's due to, because when they exited, we asked them to actually fill up some of the roads because they had erosion, but probably they brought in soils that had seeds from somewhere, and then now it's also creating an invasion problem. So what these results are showing, they're showing a snippet in time. So restoration does need to be monitored. At this time, it's working, but in the future, things might change. And because you're seeing an increase in invasive alien plants in those areas. And so managers should actually focus on clearing all these secondary invasions, because the secondary invasions are now invasive acacias, and acacias are well known to be much more aggressive than pines, and they change the soil, they enrich the soil, which is not great for a system like Fynbos. So thank you. And this is what the sites look like. So for you who are interested, these are at the top there, it's 2 years, 3 years after clear filling, 4 years, and that's like 5 years after clear filling.